To make our clean and simple card, we are going to use some green and gold paper with the Lisa Horton cutting dies from the Daisy Burst collection. If you don't have the green and yellow paper but you're still quite keen on doing this colourway, you can use white paper with the coordinating stamps from the same collection. This has the advantage that you can put your designs of polka dots or lines onto it. For that you could use the Distress Oxide, Spice Marmalade and Twisted Citron. I've die cut a circle frame from the green paper, so I'm lucky with this die that I've got an inner circle that I will keep for another project, and then the frame itself. If you don't have that, then get two circle dies, one inside the other, cut them together and you'll get a similar sort of frame. So this is a 6x6 card and this frame is round about 4.5 inches. So that's going to be the frame for our flower. I've also die cut the flowers from the green and gold paper. So we've got 3 sizes: the large, the medium and the small. I've also kept the waste because again that will come in handy for another project. If you wanted to use the inks and the plain paper, then you would need to stamp your design out first and then move on to cutting the flowers out as I have here. You also have the option in here that there are some circles. These are fantastic for the center point, but for this particular card I'm going to use some sequins, but I'll show you why in a little while. So I want to add some dimension to these cards, so I tend to lift the petals up and then I take a pokey tool, or you can use a bamboo stick, something like that, and just ease the corners over, ease the ends of the petals over. You can be quite firm with them. The paper, you'll be surprised how much the paper will withstand. And then I take a ball tool, and you can either do this in the palm of your hand, like so. I quite like that effect, it's quite natural. It does depend on the thickness of your paper, the effect that you're going to get. Or you can take a mat and push the flower down. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put together some green and some golden yellow, and then we will work out how to layer them up onto one another for the next stage. We're at the point where we want to construct our card. I tend to enjoy making cards that are fairly clean and simple, but then might have some details that you might not necessarily realise are there, but they do add interest the closer that you look. So this is going to be a flower wreath. So imagine this is the wreath that you're then going to build the flowers onto. Now I know that I want to put the majority of my flowers in this section here. So before I put the wreath on, I'm just going to add a tiny little bit of interest by using ink and a stencil. So let's move this out of the way. Now I happen to have one of Lisa Horton's stencils. This will be coming out later in the year, but this is quite good for adding just a tiny little bit of interest. So I've gone back to the Twisted Citron ink, but I have some very mucky daubers that I tend to use one per colour, and then I keep them in a plastic egg box. But I haven't actually put any more ink on because there's enough on here for the effect that I want. So I didn't actually ink it before I got to this stage. So remember, our wreath ring is going about here, and I just want a small area here that you might not even see until you look at it closely. So just daubing just a tiny little whisper of colour. That's where these stencils are so useful. I hope you can see that. And then I'm going to go ahead and stick my flower frame on. So you might have seen this before. I don't really like things on my hand, not glue on the back of my hand. I'm not really a mucky crafter. So what I tend to do is quite generously pop on the glue, and then I use my mat, or I use a takeaway lid to take the excess off. So there's our frame. Okay, now I want to move on to talking a little bit about how I decide where the flowers are going to go. So these are the flowers made up. So you've got your 3 layers, and I want all the colours to move around the card. So that's one of the reasons why I picked the green to go with the frame. But that all came from the fact that I wanted to use some of this vibrant sisal. So the sisal is like a very fine, it's like fairy string, and you only need a little bit, and it's enough. Glue is enough. You can use hot glue, but I'm going to use less than that. But it's going to go under here, and then the flowers are going to sit on the top. So I'm going to work through a few options, bearing in mind that I want to work with odd numbers. So the heavier part of the arrangement is going to go down here in my right hand corner. So I quite like putting 3 cards together like that, and then I would imagine that the sisal will go underneath, and I will pop a sentiment here, and then I would put some sequins around. You could make the arrangement heavier and bring these round to here. I think then you would need a bigger sentiment. You could put the flowers round here, but again I would use different sized flowers, and another alternative is to balance it out so that you've got 3 and 1. But for this particular card, I think I'm going to go with my 3 flowers around this right hand bend of the circle, because then I can imagine I'm going to put a sentiment here, and then we'll look at how we're going to place the sequins as the final embellishment. I only want a little bit of the sisal, so I am bending it in on itself to make, it's almost like making a little bird nest. You can always cut some away at the end if you want to, but it's only there to give the flowers something to rest in. It's instead of having leaves, really, trying to just make it look a little bit more natural. So the stencil's underneath, it's hidden to the naked eye, but it pleases me to know that it's there, so that when someone looks at the card more closely, they can just see those little details that I've popped in. So the sisal's going to rest on the wet glue, and then it will hold in place when I put these other flowers in. So we're going to go with the centre one first, plenty of glue. And then I hold the smaller end of my ball tool just to hold it in place, and I can turn it around if I want to. And then I'm going to take the yellow elements and I'm going to tuck the petals slightly underneath. It will take a little while for this glue to set, but that means you can manipulate the flowers how you want them to look. And then this one's just going to sit around this way, like so. There we go. I've gone ahead and stamped the thank you sentiment from the Just Saying ticker phrases onto green paper using my VersaFine Black Clair ink. And I think I'm going to place the sentiment quite centrally, because I want my eye to be drawn from this area here through into the centre of the card and then slightly looking upwards. If you put the sentiment here, you need something else on the top of the card. If you put the sentiment here, you would need to maybe put some more flowers on this side. But can you see how your eye will be drawn around depending on where you put the different elements? But this particular time I want the sentiment to be central, so that I then move my eye around the card. So you could use sticky pads for this part. There we go. Now to finish off the card, I'm going to use some sequins. I've got a wide range of colours. I just tend to pick them up as I see colours that are seasonal. I think these ones were from Tonic Studios, but they are a beautiful colour and they work really well with this card. So I'm going to begin by putting 3 in the centre here. I used to have a sticky tool, but it's not working anymore, so I'm back to using my tweezers and my pokey tool. Then finally I want to put a few sequins around the frame of the card to draw my eye around. So I tend to use 3 sequins. It could almost be my trademark, but what I'm really doing is I'm using a triangle to even out where my eye is looking. Now I could do this part several times until I'm happy with how the card sits. What I'm really doing is trying to make it look natural, but without you realizing that I've done anything. Now this triangle is too even for me, so it's made the pattern square, and I don't like that. So I'm going to try and bring my eye over this side, slightly lose this one, and then possibly bring this one inside. That's better because it's bringing my eye around and up through the card, but it's still not quite right. So let's try not having anything in this area here, and then bringing our eye to this part of the card. Again, it's too even. It's quite a hard thing to explain. All I can really do is to move the sequins until I have a pleasing effect. So as you can see, this is really, I quite like that. Let's see if that works better there. Quite like that the triangle is going from there to there to that, to this side, up and through. That works quite well. I quite like this layout, so that the eye is being drawn round and through, and then in that way it's like an illusion. It makes you think there's something going on in the rest of the card, whereas really it's just white space. You have to be quite brave and know when to leave well alone, but I'm happy with that, so let's go with it. There we go, one clean and simple card.